and they trailed. It took about 3 years for me to get sentenced on it. So pretty much all throughout my undergrad years, I knew I was looking at 20 years to life. So I knew I was going to be going to prison at some point in time. And we just kept kind of delaying it. And I was able to finish, actually, and just maybe a week or so after graduating. So when all my friends were trying to set up internships and jobs and the excitement of graduating, I was in a courtroom looking at 20 years to life and getting sentenced just about a week or so after graduation.
That's crazy, but there's a blessing in all this. Is up, fam? I'm Dr. Dale, the author of How to Raise a Doctor Wisdom from Parents Who Did It, the author of Black Men in White Coats, the author of Pre-Med Mondays, author of the Dr. Doc Children's Series, and the author of this new bad boy that's about to come out. Some of you already have it, A Doctor's Guide to Self-Publishing. So for anybody in healthcare who wants to self-publish, I got you. Click on the links below, learn how to do it, and we'll get you taken care of, all right? And you listen to the Black Men in White Coats podcast, the place where Black clinicians have the platform to share their stories with listeners like you, super geeked about today's guest, super geeked, and y'all gonna love it, and y'all gonna see what I mean. This is something different today, and I mean different. But before I tell you about that, and before we get into that, just a lot of updates in the world of Black Men in White Coats, a whole lot of updates. Thank you guys for watching the documentary. We're constantly getting messages, posts, all sorts of stuff. Really appreciate it. And the summit, the youth summits are back. Yesterday, we signed three partnership agreements, so get ready. Youth summits are coming across the country for you guys. We're super excited to get those rolling again. Every day, we're getting people who are looking to host summits. So, hey, we're back. Black Men in White Coats. COVID's not stopping anything. All right, now you guys are here today for, it's a treat, man. I'll tell you, this is different. We haven't had anything like this before. So I'm not going to get too much into a story, but all I'm going to say, just to make sure y'all don't leave, is today we've got Dr. Stanley Andrisse. And man, I can't even begin to tell you how good a story is. I'll just say this, all right? He grew up maybe not the best circumstances, ended up going to prison, and now he is a PhD, MBA, faculty at Howard and Georgetown, I believe, and he's on a different level. Dr. Stanley Andrisse, welcome to Black Men in White Coats. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Glad to be here. So,
man, so I'm not going to take up too much time. I'm going to kind of just get right into it. You had a long journey, something different in your journey. Let's go back to the beginning and tell me, what was your childhood environment like? What things led you down that road that you ended up going towards a prison route, a route that you probably didn't want to go. Nobody wants to go. But what was your environment that led you down that road?
Yeah. So, quick intro, which, you touched on, but, I'm a formerly incarcerated person with 3 felony convictions, was sentenced to 10 years in prison as a prior persistent career criminal. Was told by the prosecutor at that time that I was hopeless, was going to be stuck in this revolving door of incarceration. Fast forward some time, as you mentioned, now Dr. Stanley Andrisse, endocrine scientist, professor at the Mecca, Howard University College of Medicine. I'm a visiting professor at Georgetown Medicine. Also took my hustle across seas. I'm a visiting professor at Imperial College London. And formerly, I was a faculty member at Johns Hopkins Medicine. So I didn't quite live up to that prophecy that the prosecutor, bestowed on me in those early days of my life, in my early 20s. But you know what, my child, so I'm from the Ferguson, Missouri area. I was arrested for the first time at 14 years old. Continued to make decisions that kind of led me deeper into the criminal legal system to that point that I was sitting in that courtroom in my early 20s. But even before that first arrest at 14, I felt as if I was already a criminal in many ways. I think my schooling, I was just in and out of detention and suspension and conduct issues. And I was an athlete. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school and, played sports all through my younger years. So my teachers and people of authority really saw my athletic talent, but didn't really foster my intellectual talent, and more so, just saw me as a troublemaker, kid from a neighborhood that's, has a lot of people involved in activities that lead them into the criminal legal system. So,
What high
even
school?
before,
What high
what's
school
that?
did you go? What high school did
Are
you
you
go to in
from St.
town?
Louis?
My wife's from O'Fallon, Illinois, and I went to Mizzou, University of Missouri. So I know a lot of Florida and
Yeah,
Ferguson
yeah,
folks.
yeah. So I actually talk about that in my book, which just to plug it real quick, I thought we might touch on it, but the book is called From Prison Cells to PhD. It's never too late to do good. And I could talk about the meaning a little bit later if we have time, but I mentioned the aspect because people know about Ferguson because of, you know,
Yeah.
Mike Brown and how he was killed in the streets. And then the reports came out about the over policing, the excessive policing, the use of force. So I had people pulling guns on me. I had cops pulling guns on me when I was just 14, 13 years old. Um, the high school, my brothers, I'm the youngest of five. My brothers and sisters went to Hazelwood East, which is in the Ferguson Florissant area. It has its challenges. A lot of NFL athletes have come out of East, but it's not known for its intellectual folks coming from the school. So my brother got into, some family members got into some issues, and my parents decided to have me go down the street, a school called Rosary High School. So I went to Rosary High School.
Okay. So as a youngest of five, what kind of influence were your older siblings on? What kind of influences were your siblings on you? And were you somebody who was always smart? Did you want to do good? Were you a reader? Did you have that intellectual capacity from a young age?
Um, so I would say that I was, a lot of things in life were just um, telling me who I was at that time. As a lot of young Black kids, men and Black boys and girls, society, culture, different things kind of tell them who they should be, and those tend to sometimes have a bigger influence. So for me, I school, I wasn't bad in school, but it was not a focus of mine. Like, it was all about sports. And then I started to get involved in the streets, and it was about sports and hustling. And that it wasn't really about the books for me in my earlier schooling years.
How did you get involved in the streets? Was it you just walk outside and people probably doing that? Did somebody particularly come out and recruit you, or you were
So
drawn to
I
the
talk
the
about this in the book as well. Like, there was, I had a family member that was pretty heavily into gangs, and he was a blood, and he got into a number. Like, I would see him, bloodied up and beaten up, and I see him and completely dressed in all red and all the flags and the do rags, and see him hanging out with his peoples and whatnot. And so I started to, and I'm only, I'm under 10 years old at this age, for me, I didn't see, I saw them carrying guns and things of that nature. I didn't see that as like, to me, they were just an older family member, that it didn't come across as being a bad thing. It came across as, this is what takes place in the area that we live in. So it was almost as if, instead of like being scared of it, it was something that this was a person that I looked up to. So in a sense, I looked up to him. And so that was one of the people that I looked up to. And he ended up getting involved in the legal system as well, through, some of the gang related things that he got into.
Yeah, so you get pulled into this kind of lifestyle. You do whatever you do during that lifestyle. First time you're in the system, somewhat is it 14? Is that right? Around 14 years old or so?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then when you come out of that little stint, is there anything in your mind that says, "Hey, let me get on the right track," or is it still just more of the same?
Yeah. I don't want to spoiler alert, because I want to tell your readers and your
Yeah.
audience to go read the book. But I talk about this in the book as well. And So I ended up getting, my family ends up kind of putting about an intervention. I'll put it in that way. They do kind of, I think there was a show called Intervention, like when family comes together, or, family comes together and like, you got to change. And I'm only 14 and my family kind of had this intervention with me. And so there was that point, and I think it did have an impact. And then I go into talking in the book again, how just some different social, economic, cultural aspects of where I live that still drew me into getting deeper into making poor decisions. And not only that, to add to that is, again, I know now what it's called. It's called the school to prison pipeline. I was already being fed into this turning machine called the school to prison pipeline, where the authorities in my life, so we know about Ferguson now that it's primarily a Black area, but most of the teachers are white. Most of the political figures are white. The police are white. So there was just the authority figures around me were telling me that I was a criminal. So, even with this intervention that my family, and so I'm Haitian. That's another big part of, what I'll talk about, if I have a quick moment to talk about the title of the book. I guess I could just mention it right now. So from prison cells to PhD is clearly kind of the journey that I took. And it's, more than just the real journey that I took. It's, the metaphor behind it is the idea of going from this place of hopelessness, which is what the prosecutor saw for me, what she prophesied as a young Black kid from where I came from. She saw hopelessness in this revolving door of incarceration and this desolate place of despair. So the book is talking about going from that place to a place of feeling like you have value and worth and purpose in life. So I talk about that journey in the book and how I went from that, from point A to point B, and I use education as that vehicle. But then the subtitle of the book is "It's Never Too Late to Do Good," which so my family, as I mentioned, were Haitian. English was actually my second language. My family, and I still speak Creole to each other. So a phrase that my dad used to always tell me was "Il n'est jamais trop tard pour faire bien," which the literal meaning is "It's never too late to do good." But the truer translation of it was what he was meaning is that it's never too late to reach your full potential, and it's never too late to do the right thing, which is I ended up losing my father to type 2 diabetes. When I went away and got sentenced to my 10-year sentence, about 2 years into it, he went through a number of hospitalizations, surgeries, amputations, to the point that he ended up losing his battle with type 2 diabetes, which was partially the inspiration behind what I do as an endocrinologist now. But his phrase was this idea to him, even at my young age. He was telling me that when you're ready, I believe that you can bring value to yourself and to the world. And when you're ready to do that, I'll be here waiting for you. And unfortunately, I ended up losing him before I really had the opportunity to let him know that I began to understand that. But it's a powerful message for the criminal legal system, because too often the prosecutors in the system sees Black kids like myself and they throw us away and they say that you're a hopeless cause. But the message that he was delivering to me, he was like, I know you're making these decisions now, but I believe in you. I believe in your potential. I believe in the value you can bring. And when you're ready to believe in yourself and see that in yourself, I'll be here waiting for you. And so that is the message behind that he was constantly giving me. But in my to your question about how the intervention with my family and different things didn't quite work at that age, and I mean I was a teenager, and there were these other influences pulling me, and there were these other authoritative figures telling me that I was indeed a criminal, whereas I had this other messaging, but I had even more messaging coming in telling me who I was.
But what I love about that is all that stuff your family did for you and what your dad was telling you stuck with you deep in your heart over the years. So all that stuff never left you.
I want them bad like a daddy, yeah. Only do it like Flagger, yeah. I'm kicking flavor, no saga, yeah. Hey, I like them blues. I might go Janet like Jackson. I got them options, yeah. It's all about progression. Life is like a blessing. Everything a win, loss is like a lesson. Ooh, ooh. Yeah, ain't no time for stressing.
So fast forward, you go down the system. You're in the system for I'm not sure how many years you actually served, if it was a full 10 or if it was less, but you serve your time. But even before that, you had gone to college, right?
Yeah, so I was a 3-sport athlete, as I was mentioning. I played football, basketball, and track. I'm a speed guy, and you know, coincidentally, like I was almost kicked out of high school on a number of occasions, but my track coach was also the disciplinary principal. So every time that I was about, you know, I accumulated enough detentions and suspensions for them to actually expel me. He like pled to them to not expel me because they needed me for track. So, you know, only during track season. So luckily track season was the end of the year. So by the time I accumulated all these marks against me, he was able to save me before the school year ended. And then, you know, a new slate started that next school year in terms of like detentions it took to get expelled. But I ended up getting a sports scholarship. I played football at Lindenwood University. But by the time I got to Lindenwood, I had already been I was already very deep into hustling, and I ended up catching I ended up catching 2 additional cases, and they trailed. It took about 3 years for me to get sentenced on it. So pretty much all throughout my undergrad years, I knew I was looking at 20 years to life. So I knew I was going to be going to prison at some point in time. And we just kept kind of delaying it. And I was able to finish actually, and just maybe a week or so after graduating. So when all my friends were trying to set up internships and jobs and the excitement of graduating, I was in a courtroom looking at 20 years to life and getting sentenced just about a week or so after graduation.
That's crazy, but there's a blessing in all this. You go do your time, but somewhere along that journey decide to change your life. You come out and something tells you to go get your PhD and MBA.
Yeah. So, I mean, a large part of that was what I mentioned with my father, you know, his health. I felt he was a relatively healthy person. He had type 2 diabetes, and I was familiar with with diabetes, but he was relatively healthy. And then, you know, he just went into this phase of, you know, his health just plummeted and in and out of the hospital. And for me, and, you know, being young and there's probably some truth to it. I feel like the stress of me going away, his youngest child, played a role in that. So I had this, you know, resentment and this guilt sitting with me in this prison cell. And, you know, death and dying is difficult at any stage or wherever you're at. But to go through that in prison, like the emotional stages of grief, like feeling anger, you can't do that in prison. You can't just like lash out and be mad at somebody. Like that could literally get you hurt. That could literally put yourself in harm's way. You know, I couldn't be sad and cry. That is a sign of weakness and vulnerability, which again could bring harm my way. So I didn't have the opportunity to really go through the stages of grief and the emotional. So I channeled this emotional distress into wanting to learn more about diabetes. So I read my first scientific article on diabetes while I was locked in a cage. And it was, you know, it offered me this opportunity that although my body was locked in this prison cell, my mind was roaming around in the human cell. And that offered me the opportunity to be free. So I was, my body was locked up, but my mind was free. And you're a doctor, obviously, and you've read plenty of scientific articles, I'm sure, and you know that every other word is something that you've never heard of. Every other word besides a, the, and is some alphabet soup. And we didn't have the dictionaries to learn that alphabet soup. So I would just, spend hours, days, weeks, even months on one scientific article. And that allowed me, one, to like fall in love with learning about the cell, but also just freed my mind. So that was this epiphany that really pulled me out and said, I want to do something different. And I was also fortunate enough to have this mentor step into my life at that same time that really saw my intellectual potential and started investing in that and really pushing for me to continue my education. So I ended up putting together a number of applications while I was still inside, and was, months and months to put these together. And, just all of them were rejected, except for the one from St. Louis University, where this mentor that stepped into my life was on the admissions committee at. So I got in, and it was a wrap. I ended up completing my PhD, MBA, top of my class in much shorter time than my peers. Moved on to Hopkins, here at the Mecca, Georgetown, Imperial. But along the way, ended up starting a nonprofit called From Prison Cells to PhD. And we run a program called Prison to Professionals, where, I basically was taking notes along the way, like why are so many of us, 75% of people that step out of prison end up stepping back into prison. But if you just put education under your belt, you drop that recidivism rate down to the teens. And the more education you put under your belt, the less chance it is. So, I basically took notes, and, we've now created a roadmap for folks to help them stay out of prison and take them from that A to B, and use education as that vehicle.
I love it. So for the listeners, right, I'm going to make it so y'all got to go get the book to get the rest of the story, right? Y'all got to go get the book. So I'm going to give you the last word, and I'd love for you to end it with, my name is Dr. Stanley Andrisse, and I'm a Black man in the white coat. And also, one last time, tell them the name of your book, tell them the name of your the website to your nonprofit, your program, and whatever else, your hashtags, all that type of stuff, handles.
Yeah, so the name of the book, as well as the organization, is From Prison Cells to PhD. You can find the book on any of your outlets, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore. From Prison Cells to PhD, it's never too late to do good. I am Dr. Stanley Andrisse, and I am a Black man in a white coat.
Ain't no time for stressing, I've been really stepping. Ooh, ooh. Yeah, if you wanna go get it, stop playing around. Really got on racks, ain't playing around. Wanna go get it, stop playing around. Really got on racks, ain't playing around. Black men, white coats, here we up right now.